So my name is Frédéric Lavigne. I think maybe one of the first speakers in French. So we'll notice that. I'll try to make an effort. Today we're going to talk about cloud functions, or Apache OpenWhisk. Both are kind of the same stuff. I guess there is no real need to introduce serverless to everyone here. Most of you must know about it, and we already had great speakers about this. But I just want to use one application which I built, and that I like to use when I need to introduce serverless to clients or to developers. So this app is about those smiley faces. That might be something that you have seen in airports, in retail shops, where you can just come and pass on your feedback about your experience. And when you look at such an application, and I like to use this, it's about asking a question. So something like, did you like my talk? And you could get feedback. And here you get a small UI that you can use to get feedback. So like, let's think about an iPad that you will share, circulate across the room so that people could just tap on the smiley faces to share their feedback about your talk. Hopefully that one. Now, when I look at this, I can get statistics here about who has been clicking on what, and if people are happy with the talk. And if you think about this kind of application, it's one where, as a developer, I don't want to have to manage any server. It's really about focusing on those actions or functions that I will need to implement this application and then deploying them. Now, if I'm going to circulate this iPad across the room, there might be a peak of audience. If we put that maybe at the exit, I want my app to scale automatically. I don't want to have to manage any servers there. So I like this app. Sorry. I like to use this app to show those characteristics of a serverless platform in terms of auto-scaling, the event programming model. Like I may want to extend this app so that whenever someone creates equations or rate a question, I get a notification. So that would be the event programming model coming with serverless that will allow me to do this. The charge, in that case, you don't want to pay if nobody is using it. And you want to pay, I guess, not so much if someone is actually using it. So I did set up, too fast. I did set up this link here that will allow you to kind of rate the conference, not even talking about my talk, so that would be easier. So you can just go there, you'll get the smiley faces, whether it's on your mobile or on your laptop, and you can rate the conference during the whole day. At the end of the day, we will share this on our accounts or with the conference. And because we could, I also put together an SMS gateway so that if you want to try it, you can text this number with Paris, space, and a smiley face. So those are a variation of those. So that we'll get another way to vote for this application. So obviously, all this is built on top of a serverless platform, which is called IBM Cloud Functions. So some of you may have heard about this before with another name, OpenWhisk. And it's actually our IBM Function as a Service platform to respond to events with code. And I was talking about Apache OpenWhisk. So like 2 years ago, maybe when we started this project and we released it, we called it OpenWhisk. And at some point we thought it will make sense to donate all this to the Apache Foundation to have an open source function as a service platform, which is what happened. We got partnership with Adobe, Red Hat, who are using also this platform to build on top of it. And actually today, the code of Apache OpenWhisk is what is really used into our managed offering. Like the developer team is contributing directly to the open source project. And we have built a community around it that contributes also other features, bug fixes to the platform. So 2 ways to get access to this technology: through the open source one, where you can just start a VM. There is a background setup so that you can start OpenWhisk on your own machine, or you can have the cloud function with a free trial so that you can try it. When we talk about serverless, I think there are a few concepts that we need to keep in mind. it all starts with the source of events. And with those events, we want to trigger a response. The response will, at some point, trigger your action that will produce some results. In OpenWhisk, there is this concept of rule, which could allow you to enable, disable a given trigger at a given time. So let's maybe look at it instead of talking. So here I have the Cloud Function user interface, which is in the IBM Cloud. And we're going to go through a few demos there. So let's start by creating a new action here. So an action can be, any type of code that you want to run as part of a function. So here we have support for actions, sequence, which are a list of actions that you want to run one after the other. Triggers, that will be there is a new record somewhere, you want to trigger a response. And then we have some templates that you can use to start up new projects. So I'm going to pick an action here as a starting point. I'm going to name it Hello World, original. And here you can pick different type of languages. So we have support for Node.js 6, 8, PHP, Swift, Python, but also Java. And there is a special support for Docker, so not as orchestration, but just as a way for you to package your image as a Docker container image, and then use this for the implementation of the action. But we're going to stick with Node.js here. So here I have a simple action. Let's make this a bit bigger. We have a simple hello world action that just has a main and a set of parameters, and I can run it in the IBM Cloud. It returns me the hello world. So that's very basic. What we can do then is to look at the parameters. So I'm going to cheat a bit and just do copy paste from here. And we can then save this, invoke it. So saving will deploy it to the Cloud Functions platform. I can run it. And from there, so here it says hello Paris because I have some input here that will just pass this parameter. So that's one way to get access to the parameter of the function, so that then you can use them in your application. Another thing that we can do here, if we think about actions, they become useful when you start really embedding them into your application. So whether it's a web app, a mobile app, you will want to take this and be able to call it from your application. So here it's about creating an endpoint that you can invoke. And that's something that we can do within the Cloud Function. If I go here, I have this enable as web action. So this will turn my action into a REST endpoint that I can call. So let's do this. And from here, I can copy this link. And this should give me the link to call my action. So it's the hello stranger. And so now if I change it, passing parameters on the query string, like the name, now let's go with Paris. Here we get the results with the Paris that has been taken from the query string. So that's one way to use this action as part of a web application. It has the right course header so that you can call it from your JavaScript code on another domain. And another aspect is sometimes it's not just about processing JSON in your action. You may want just to produce a report, generate some images, some graphs, something like this. So there is this support for raw HTTP handling, which if I enable it like this and save, now I can go back to some code that I've prepared here that will allow me basically to generate not just JSON, but something else. So let's save this one. So the code here is just generating some SVG image. That's easier to read, but it could be generating PDF. I think the key here is to be able to manage the headers. Something bigger, yeah. So that you can set the content type and then output the body. So this is saved. Now let's go back to the link that I had here and try to call that one. And it gives me again, the theme here of smiley faces. So that's, take an action, turn it into an endpoint, and from there you can either produce JSON or in time of binary content. You may have noticed here that the link is calling the Bluemix, also the IBM Cloud domain, which might not want what you want to have in your app. You would want maybe your own domain. You may want also to control this API. Like if you start having 2, 3, 4 actions, tens of them, you want maybe to have something a bit better documented, and maybe something that you can share with others, put security on top of it. So there is this capability called API Gateway, and it's the one that we are going to enable now. So let's revert a bit the code here to something simpler, and go back with regular action. So if I go back to APIs here, I can create a new manage API, and as part of this manage API, so let's call it the Hello API, I could pick my own domain to host my actions under my own domain, which makes sense if you are building a real app rather than using a domain provided by the cloud provider. The base path will be world or hello, that's easier. And then I can create operation as part of my API. So here we're going to create just one world action, which is a get, and we're going to pick the hello world action that I just created before. Saving this. Now I can, once this is saved, bear with me. Come on, guys. That will come eventually. Or not. You don't mind? I refresh this. All right. Try it one more. Sure, it should work. Hello/hello. And here we want one operation, which is word. Bam, bam, bam. Hello word. Come on, guys. If it doesn't work, I'll move to something else. All right, let's forget this. The idea here will be that you can create this API, and at some point, you may want to enable things like security. So like, if I were to switch here, I could enable security for my API so that, with things like a header, I could protect my API and prevent anyone from calling it. And then add things like OAuth authentication, if I want to do that as part of the definition of my API. So I did that already with another API, which is the one used by the emoting application I was showing before. So here, this is the app that has the smiley, and if we look at its definition, so it's made of several actions that are calling, that are implementing this API. So like, every time you go to this UI, you type a question, you hit the get feedback button, it will call the put for the new question. That will show you, when you look at the smiley, it will be a read of the question showing the title, and then the ratings that we see here will be what you can use to, the action that will be called whenever someone tap on an action. We see also the rating Nexmo here. So Nexmo is the provider I used for the SMS gateway. And actually this one will use a sequence to just reroute to the existing action that was about tapping a smiley face. So it's reuse of actions and combining them within a sequence. Things like rate limits is also a capability that you can add on this API so that you could, as soon as you publish an API and you start sharing it, you may want also to limit how much calls can be done per second on your API. So talking about this emoting app, one thing that I talked about was this concept of triggers. So if we look back at the architecture of this application here, so it's basically the web UI that we were seeing before is just a set of pages hosted in GitHub. And GitHub, you have this capability of GitHub pages. So I just turned that on the repo. And then so I get a serverless web app for free, basically. And then there is API calls going through this API gateway component of Cloud Functions that will route all the API endpoints to actual function calls. And everything that's a bit down there, there is Cloudant, which is a NoSQL database. Here. And so this database, it has connection with Cloud Functions, so it's provided by IBM too. And there is a way to get to set a trigger on the Cloudant database to be notified whenever there is something new. So that's what I wanted to try, like to get notified whenever someone is rating the application, rating the equation. So if we go back to the UI here, and we go back to all the actions, I did prepare one that will, read from the Cloudant database the new rating that will have been created after being notified of this, and translate the rating into a text that I can then send to Slack. So this is this emoting rating to Slack sequence. So the first action in this sequence is about reading the document from the database, then preparing it for Slack, just creating a text out of it, and finally posting this to Slack. Currently, it's not doing anything because it's not really connected to Cloudant. So what we can do here is go to the connected triggers and say that I want to automate this action and have it called whenever there is a change in Cloudant. Let's do this. Let's connect the ratings to Slack in Paris. And the Cloud instance here, so it's which database instance I want to use, so it's the one for this emoting application. And within this emoting application, there is a rating database. And in this rating database, I want to get all the new documents. So let's create and connect here. The codes of the buttons are working. Good. And now, so I have a trigger set up for this action. So now, what I would expect is that every time someone will come and start clicking on the smiley faces, there should be a notification coming to Cloudant, and almost good. And if we go here in Slack, we see the notifications that are coming. So who's doing that? Come on, stop clicking on it. So every time someone is tapping one of the smiley face, it will create a new record database, and the Cloudant trigger will just kick in and call my sequence. I like those. Keep going. I have the names of who is clicking also. Yeah, let's talk about that guy. All right. So that's, to be able to add those triggers quite easily. I'm going to keep it running. I'm going to float my Slack channel. But so what we have seen here was the ability to create actions, so in JavaScript, but there is also Java and Swift and Python and others. New language being provided by the community through the open source project too. There is support for asynchronous actions, synchronous. So we have seen the synchronous one where whenever someone was tapping on an action on a smiley face, that was a synchronous call to the Cloud Functions. But there is also asynchronous, so that's more what you see with the trigger aspect. And there is also this capability to do scheduled actions, so that you may want to run a report every day at midnight. You could schedule an action like this with a simple cron syntax that will allow this. In terms of built-in event sources, so we have seen the database as one there. There is Message Hub, which is pops up like topics and messages, where you may want to react to any new message coming out of a topic. Or GitHub also, whenever there is a commit, maybe you want to trigger some actions behind this to rebuild something, or maybe run some tests out of the GitHub commits. And what we saw also in the demo was this concept of web actions and API gateway, which I think is really what you will want to use whenever you start building like backend with serverless. So whether it's a web backend or a mobile application backend, you have this API gateway component, which is part of Cloud Functions with no added cost in that case. And so you can build your app with this. So one aspect I will not demo there, but we can demo that at the booth, is a new component we're adding on top of this called Composer. And so there is this concept of sequence in Cloud Functions, so one action, a list of actions. But quite often, that's not enough. Or most of the time, that will not be really enough, because you will want to implement maybe some, thank you. You will want to implement maybe some routing into your actions, some loops, something like this. So the composer is there for this and gives you some combinations so that you can do ifs, you can do repeat loops, maybe take the output of one action and reuse it later into the flow. So this is currently in development on top of Cloud Function and OpenWhisk. All right. So use cases, yeah, I think it's good to know about technical aspects, but it gets even more interesting when we see what people are actually doing with this technology. Might give you new ideas about what you can build next. So what we can do with Cloud Functions, so we have seen, running logic whenever there is something happening with database, in the IoT world, processing IoT data from sensors. Chatbots here are also quite hot with serverless, because it's a nice way to maybe implement the logic behind the chatbot or the chatbot itself, and some pluggable component behavior that you would put to your actions. The schedule task is another one of the use cases that we have seen, and this concept of API and mobile backend is one of the last use cases that we have seen. So one client that we have been working with is a startup called Dovi, and what they are doing is they are using hypersonic waves, so hypersonic sounds, to send data. And so they have one use case for coupons, and advertisements, and one for, how's it called? Mobile payments between two mobile phones or between a point of sale and a mobile. And so they've been using serverless here and Cloud Functions to build their solution. And for them, the idea was to really reduce the cost and be able to scale quite efficiently in their case. And what they did recently is a commercial with Coca-Cola, or trial with Coca-Cola, where Coca-Cola was broadcasting an ad on TV. And they did partner with a taxi company. The taxi company had a mobile app, and in the mobile app, they had this Dovi SDK. And what happens, like, you watch the TV, there is this Coca-Cola ad coming in, and your phone starts ringing, sending you a notification, because the phone heard some sound coming from the TV that you cannot hear, but your phone can. And what it was saying was just a pop-up, a message notification, asking you whether you want to drink a Coke right now. And because they had this partnership with the taxi company, if you were saying yes, the taxi will come, knock at your door a few minutes later, and deliver you a Coke. So that was this idea, of using this hypersonic wave to have your phone react to something, and there it's OpenWhisk being used in the backend to send all those notifications. And their other use case I was talking about is this mobile to mobile payment system, where here it's all transactions, back and forth between all the organizations that they use for where they use Cloud Functions. So nice way to implement serverless. Another one, it's in the mobile world here. So it's an application called the Weather Gods. You can find it on the iOS App Store. Yeah, I think they have only support for iOS today. And it's basically weather on steroids. So if you want to get notified when we will see the sun here another day, you could use this app to set a notification, and you may receive, a message when the forecast tells you that the sun is coming back. So for them, the idea was to reuse their Swift skills. So it's an iOS shop, and so they've been using Swift to build the app, which looks something like this. And the idea then was to say, yeah, we have those skills, we'd like to reuse them for all our backend. And when you look at their architecture, it's quite a few things happening in the backend. Like whenever someone starts, you have this app, you want to set an alert, so they have on their backend some system that will There a pointer on this? Yeah. So some system that will scan, plan for scan of new weather data using this cron trigger that I was talking about, these periodic alarms. And from there, they will start calling the weather services to be able to get new weather data. And once they have this data, it's all about starting to dispatch notification to all the clients, client application based on the type of notification that they want to get. So here for them, it was about the skills that they could reuse, removing this server that was doing just polling to trigger the the polling that was used every 3 minutes to start getting new weather data. And so they save money by removing this server, and they also save some infrastructure costs. So another good example, I think, of using serverless in mobile backends. And the last one is a company called Abilisence, and they are into security of your home. So they have one appliance that you can install in your place. The appliance starts listening, that's kind of Black Mirror stuff. The appliance starts listening to everything that's happening in your home, and when they detect patterns, someone breaking a window, maybe someone calling for help, they will trigger notification. They may call for the police or for an ambulance to come at your place. And all this, they are doing it also with a serverless platform. With such an architecture that has, starting point here is the appliance sending data to an IoT platform, but also storing the audio file that are being recorded. And then they have some processing with machine learning as part of cloud functions that will look at the sounds, figure out what this is about, and then trigger notifications. So it might be calling an emergency service, maybe just sending you a text. They also have some integration with the weather channel. So they try to really correlate different source of events to figure out what's really happening. So if you want to learn more about cloud functions, serverless in general, I put here the links to obviously the cloud functions where you can get the trial, the OpenWhisk open source that you can install on your own machine, the Slack channel. The dev team is really active on this. I've seen many questions answered by them, and good interaction between the community and the IBM development team. And all the links, Twitter, GitHub, Medium, so you get used to all this thing. That's all for me. So I will give you back 3 minutes. Thank you.